While car design got rounder in the late 90s, the technology was sharper than ever. Hello friends, my name is Emile, welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps, and today we're doing the final part of my Iconic Cars series, this time taking a look at the iconic cars of the late 90s. We start today with the Volkswagen Corrado VR6, 178 horsepower, 2,734 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful vehicle here today, and the Corrado has an extremely interesting history. Originally, the Volkswagen Corrado was meant to be the next car on from the Porsche 924. This car was meant to originally be a Porsche, however Porsche backed out of it and Volkswagen just decided to use the Corrado base as a Volkswagen. This car also has some weird things going on. The rear suspension's from a Golf Mark II, I believe. The front suspension's from a Mark III. The engine's new VR6 unit. It's a weird car. But the point is, the Corrado is one of the more iconic 90s coupes. Anyways, how does it drive? Well, the VR6 unfortunately feels like it has an open differential. This is a front-wheel drive car. There's more than one front-wheel drive car here today. This is probably the worst of the two, though. It does have an open differential, it feels like. It also has some pretty awful on-power understeer. Now, on-power understeer basically means as soon as you hit the throttle, the car will just start going straight. And while that is definitely enhanced by the rain, that's one of the biggest worries around this Top Gear track. With front-wheel drive cars, on-power understeer will be amplified significantly, while open differentials may die down a bit just because they can't get quite as much traction. It's a bit of a weird one, but either way the Corrado is cross-line and it was an alright vehicle to drive. Next up we have the Subaru SVX, 230 horsepower, 3,580 pounds of weight. This is the heaviest vehicle here today, although not by much. The SVX is also a four-wheel drive vehicle. The SVX is actually an interesting enough car. This is essentially Subaru's answer to the BMW 6 Series back in the day. And it didn't sell quite as well as a BMW or a Mercedes just because, you know, back then Subaru wasn't really known for making performance cars. But the SVX is still iconic enough. It has some very unique features. This one actually has a Boxer 6 in it, which is interesting. Yeah, interesting car, the SVX. Anyways, what does the SVX feel like to drive? It feels heavy. 3,580 pounds is quite heavy. Compared to luxury coupes of today, not so much. But compared to everything else here today, yeah, this feels heavy. And while that's not particularly a bad thing, heavy cars usually handle reasonably well. We saw this with the Camaro ZL1 in Forza Motorsport 5. That was a heavy feeling car, but the handling felt really good on it. And this car also feels really solid. There's not really too much in the way of understeer or oversteer. It's just the entire car feels heavy and a little bit lazy. But still, not a bad vehicle to drive by any stretch of the imagination. It provides decent grip and, yeah, cool little car. Next up we have the Lamborghini Diablo SV, 530 horsepower, 3,474 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful vehicle here today. And as you can see by that weight, not too far off the SVX as far as weight's concerned, which is a little bit surprising. Anyways, of course, mid-engined rear-wheel drive SV, big V12 engine in the back. How does it drive? It's alright. It's alright. The Diablo is probably one of my least favourites when it comes to Ferraris. I like the Diablo, don't get me wrong. I prefer it over the Countach, but, you know, compared to stuff like the Murcielago and Aventador, the Diablo has never really been a car I'm particularly interested in, although I do very much like the VT model with, I believe I had four-wheel drive. Anyways, back to this car. Yeah, it's alright to drive. This is another car that feels very heavy. Now actually, when you compare it to modern supercars, 3,474 pounds of weight isn't actually that bad. I mean, a modern Audi R8 weighs about 3,600 pounds, I believe. But, yeah, for the day it was quite a heavy vehicle. But nevertheless, not an awful vehicle to drive. Lamborghinis are usually pretty dominant around this track, so we'll have to see how this one copes, although then again the Diablo is one of the slightly less dominant of the Lamborghinis. Next up we have the Volvo 850R, 240 horsepower, 3,230 pounds of weight. This is one of my all-time favourite cars. I adore the Volvo 850R. It's such a strange car, this. Yeah, if you're sort of scratching your head and going, why is a Volvo 850R iconic? You gotta remember, I believe this actually won a few touring car championships back in the day. This was one of the sort of biggest icons of BTCC back in the day. This was actually the car they used before they switched to the Volvo S40, and I believe this did claim 2 championship wins, although don't quote me on that. Anyways, 850R, another front-wheel drive vehicle, one of 2 front-wheel drive vehicles here today. How does it drive? It's a little bit understeery. 240 horsepower, even by today's standards, is a lot to throw through the front wheels. I mean, 240 horsepower, that's what, on par with like a Renault Megane of the modern era? So yeah, there's a lot of power to throw through the front wheels, so unsurprisingly it does generate a little bit of understeer. However, unlike the Corrado, it's nowhere near as bad. I would say in a straight line this vehicle might be a little bit slower than the Corrado. I mean, the Corrado does weigh 500 odd pounds less than this does. But yeah, the 850R is actually a surprisingly decent enough vehicle to drive. I still would recommend probably switching the front wheel drive out to say 4-wheel drive. If you actually want to drive this car with any degree of seriousness, as putting any more power through those front wheels isn't a good idea. But the 850R nonetheless is a pretty decent vehicle overall. I liked it. Next up, the Mazda RX7. This is the FD model, 261 horsepower, 2,831 pounds of weight. The Mazda RX7 has had a bit of a weird history here on Forza Top Gear laps. In Season 2, this was one of the slower C-Class cars around the track. It drove excellently, but for whatever reason it just was not a quick car around the track. However, in Season 3, the RX-7 was one of the more quicker C-Class cars. So, when it comes to the wet Top Gear track, how does the RX-7 perform? It's a nice car to drive, this one. It really is. It's a very neutral car. I've used that term before a lot. Neutral basically means the car doesn't seem to really... It's just a very easy, nice car to drive. You can very much tell what it's doing. It is drifty though. I would say that's probably enhanced quite a bit by the rain, but yeah, this is a drifty car. You can have some fun in the RX-7 if you take it around this track and, you know, you pull the handbrake a few times and just let the car do what it wants to do. As far as going for a good lap time though, it will do it. I mean, again, it's a nice handling car. The steering is pretty decent. 261 horsepower. Not a huge amount. I mean, compared to sports cars of the day, it was pretty good. Compared to, you know, modern sports cars, maybe not so much. You know, the Lexus RCF, BMW M4. But the RX-7 was a pretty decent car, actually. I enjoyed the RX-7 around here. It was quite a bit of fun. Next up, we have a Subaru Impreza 22B, 276 horsepower, 2,800 pounds of weight. Of course, I need to throw one of the rally cars in here. It's either going to be the Evo 6 or the 22B, and in my opinion I would say the 22B is probably the more iconic. Now, me personally, I do prefer the Evo 6, but you know, you can't argue with the Impreza. This was, of course, the car Colin McRae took to numerous victories on the WRC calendar, as well as a few other drivers. Anyways, 22B, how does it drive? Well, it's 4-wheel drive, we're in the wet. In fact, this is another 4-wheel drive car, one of 2 today. Along with the Subaru SVX, surprisingly, so we've had 2 Subarus. Anyways, of course, as you would imagine, 22B is pretty darn good. Out of all the cars here today, this was definitely one of the better vehicles here today. This was pretty spot on, to be honest with you. And you'd expect, like, you know, rally cars, or rally bred road cars, I should say, you know, they should be good in the rain. They should be able to deal with this pretty well. And the 22B really did, actually. I enjoyed driving this car a lot. I forgot just how good this car was when it comes to the driving dynamics of it. Yeah, pretty spot on solid car, actually. I did enjoy driving the 22B round this track. Next up we have a Lotus Elise Series 1 Sport 190, that's a mouthful. 190 horsepower, 1,477 pounds of weight. Unsurprisingly, this is the lightest vehicle here today. In fact, it's the lightest vehicle here today by a long margin. I mean, it weighs 1,300 pounds less than the VR6. So you can basically stick another one of the... You can basically take two of these and the Corrado would only just weigh a bit less. Anyways, Lotus Elise, how does it handle? It is honestly excellent. I don't remember the Lotus Elise Series 1 handling quite this nicely. But for whatever reason, maybe it's just in the rain, maybe it's because I drove this after some of the, you know, lesser handling cars. I mean, I did drive these all in order, you know, full disclosure, so I did drive this after the Subaru, so maybe, you know, just getting used to a lighter car, but yeah, the Elise was an absolutely excellent car to drive, and unsurprisingly, you know, it's a Lotus, which means it's very light. There isn't a whole lot of power, but it does drive pretty nicely, although that being said, Lotuses don't always handle perfectly, as I found out, but yeah, of course, this car was very quick around the track. Lotus kind of built the Top Gear track, so unsurprisingly, the Elise did very much have a nice day when it came to this, although we'll have to see how it placed on the leaderboard at the end. And finally today, I couldn't complete the Iconic Cars series without visiting one of these. This is the Dodge Viper GTS ACR, 460 horsepower, 3,450 pounds of weight. That is a lot of weight, but this is a lot of car. 8 litre V10, yeah. I love the Dodge Viper, and surprisingly enough, the ACR is usually a pretty decent vehicle to drive. And, well, I've got to say, yeah, it was good today. I enjoyed driving around in the Viper. Once again, though, this was another car that felt heavy. 3,450 pounds is quite a lot, although then to say this thing has a V10 engine and it weighs 3,450 pounds, it doesn't actually sound that bad. But yeah, the Viper was a little bit of a heavy car to drive. Still good though, I did enjoy the Viper. Anytime I get to drive a Viper around the track, I am very happy indeed. And yeah, I really did enjoy myself in the Dodge Viper. One of my more favourite cars in real life again. Although I do prefer the 2013 model, I can't wait to throw that around the track and see just how well that car does, because that, yeah, the 2013 and indeed the 2008 ACR Viper are fantastic handling cars, and this 99 is no real exception. It's a pretty darn good car to drive, to be honest with you. Not quite as good as I remember it, but still pretty good nonetheless. Anyways, on to the times, and the Lamborghini Diablo is the quickest car of the day, going into 6th with a 123.772, beating out a 911 GT3. Dodge Viper goes into 8th with a 125.148, and the Lotus Elise goes into 9th with 125.852. Kind of surprising the Viper beat the Elise there, but they both did beat a Ferrari F355 Berlinetta, which is pretty darn surprising, if you ask me. Moving down the board, the Mazda RX7 goes into 16th for 129.589, beats out a Lotus Carlton just a little bit off a Shelby Cobra. The Impreza 22B goes into 18th for 129.868, beats a BMW M1, which is a bona fide supercar, and an Audi Quattro, which is a Group B legend, so a pretty good showing from the 22B. And finally, the Subaru SVX goes into 29th for 134.623, beats out an Aston Martin DB5 by quite a ways, and also loses out to a Dodge Charger. Volvo 850R goes into 33rd with 136.237, and the Volkswagen Corrado VR6 goes into 34th with a 136.475. Both of those cars beat out a Renault Alpine, however both of them lose to a Vauxhall Corsa VXR and an AW11. However, considering the 850R is a big wagon and all the handling problems the Corrado had, I still think that's a pretty good showing from both vehicles. Anyways, friends, as I mentioned at the start of this episode, this is the final episode of the Iconic Cars series. I was going to move on to early 2000s and late 2000s, however, for time constraint reasons, I've decided to cut both of those episodes and just move on to a more sort of normal topic. Anyways, hopefully you've enjoyed the Iconic Cars thing, something a little bit different. And yeah, tell me what you thought about the whole thing down below in the comments. Speaking of the comments, if you have any cars or themes you'd like to see me tackle around the Top Gear track, then please do let me know in the comments section below. Anyways, friends, I want to thank you all very much for watching. My name's been the Real Emile, and until next time, farewell.